The narrow stone staircase yawned before Lucy like the throat of some ancient beast, its uneven steps worn smooth by centuries of unseen feet. Each downward movement made the air thicken, the temperature dropping until her breath crystallized in pale plumes before her face. The feeble beam of her flashlight flickered erratically, as if the very darkness resisted its intrusion, sending grotesque shadows dancing along the slick walls, shadows that moved just a fraction too late to match her steps. The light caught on something unnaturally pale against the moss-streaked stone. A child's porcelain doll sat propped against the wall, its delicate features frozen in a rictus grin. A jagged fissure split its face from forehead to chin, the left eye socket empty and dark, while the remaining blue eye stared with unsettling clarity. Tiny fingers curled around something in its lap, shards of porcelain that might have once been its other eye. The doll's lace dress, yellowed with age, rustled faintly, though no wind stirred in the stagnant air. "Creepy as hell," Lucy whispered, her voice swallowed by the pressing silence. Against every screaming instinct, she reached out. The moment her fingertips grazed the cold porcelain cheek, the world tilted violently. A child's laughter, bright and cruel, echoed inside her skull. The scent of lavender and burning hair filled her nostrils. Then came the scream, high-pitched, terrified, and utterly alien. Lucy jerked back, as if electrocuted, her elbow striking the wall. The impact sent the flashlight beam careening wildly across the chamber, illuminating a moth-eaten tapestry that billowed outward despite the dead air, its embroidered scenes of hunting parties seeming to move in the erratic light. Behind the fabric, the wall bore a painting that stopped Lucy's heart. The woman in the portrait could have been her twin, the same arch of brows, the same stubborn set to the mouth. But this woman wore a crown of twisted silver, her regal bearing unmistakable even in the flaking pigments. Her slender fingers rested possessively on the head of a monstrous black wolf, its crimson eyes gleaming with unnatural life in the flashlight's beam. The beast's lips curled back from teeth too long, too sharp, its expression caught between devotion and hunger. Lucy's pendant seared against her skin, the pain sharp enough to draw tears. Her trembling fingers rose to trace the queen's necklace, an exact duplicate of her own, down to the peculiar looping pattern along the chain. The realization sent ice water flooding through her veins. "Miss Novak!" Mr. Dragomir's voice lashed from above, sharp with something more than anger. Was that fear? The flashlight slipped from Lucy's sweat-slick grip, clattering against the stones. In that final burst of light, the painted wolf's eyes met hers, and the lids slid shut in a slow, deliberate blink. Lucy fled, her boots slipping on the damp steps. Behind her, the doll's laughter followed, not from the chamber below, but from all around her. Inside her, the sound breaking into jagged pieces that rattled in her skull. The darkness seemed to press closer, the staircase stretching impossibly long until she burst into the weak daylight, her lungs burning and the taste of copper sharp on her tongue. Only later would she notice the faint porcelain dust clinging to her fingertips, or recall how the painted queen's lips had seemed to curve into a knowing smile as she turned away. The castle grounds lay submerged in an eerie silver glow as Lucy slipped past the rusted iron gates, their intricate scrollwork casting spiderweb shadows across her path. Her sneakers crunched through the frost-stiffened grass, each step releasing the faint metallic scent of frozen earth. The air hummed with an electric charge that made her skin prickle, as if the very molecules between her fingers vibrated with restrained energy. She told herself she'd come back for answers. About the painting that mirrored her face. About the doll with its shattered eye. About the way her pendant now pulsed in time with her heartbeat whenever she approached the castle's eastern tower, its rhythm accelerating like a war drum calling her to battle. A low growl rippled through the darkness, so deep it seemed to originate from the earth itself. The sound resonated in Lucy's bones, vibrating through her molars with primal familiarity. She froze mid-step, between the skeletal birch trees, their bare branches clawing at the moonlit sky. 2 points of crimson light flared to life, not reflecting the moonlight, but glowing from within like banked coals. The massive black wolf emerged with liquid grace, its movements so perfectly silent the night itself seemed to hold its breath. Moonbeams slid across its fur without illuminating it, as if the creature absorbed light rather than reflected it. With each deliberate step, frost crystallized in its wake, delicate fractals blooming across dead leaves before shattering under invisible weight. Most unnerving of all, where its massive paws should have left impressions in the frosted earth, the ground remained untouched. Every survival instinct in Lucy's body shrieked at her to run, to flee, to put as much distance as possible between herself and this impossible creature. Yet her feet moved forward instead, drawn by something deeper than fear, older than reason. "I know you," she breathed, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. The words tasted true on her tongue, like recalling a name long forgotten. The wolf stilled, its massive head tilting as its nostrils flared, drinking in her scent. The intelligence in those crimson eyes was unmistakable, ancient, calculating, haunted. Then, a sickening series of cracks and pops split the night air, as the creature's spine arched unnaturally, its form blurred at the edges, dark fur rippling like ink spilled in water before being sucked back into pale flesh. Lucy's stomach lurched at the wet, organic sounds of the transformation, the grinding of bones reshaping, the slick slide of muscle reconfiguring, the terrible elasticity of skin stretching to accommodate the change. Yet she couldn't look away, mesmerized by the grotesque beauty of the metamorphosis. When the last shudder passed, a man stood before her, tall and powerfully built, bare-chested despite the cold, his skin sheened with sweat that caught the moonlight like liquid silver. His fingers twitched at his sides, the last remnants of black claws retracting slowly into human nails. The angles of his face were both beautiful and terrible, as if carved by conflicting hands, one that shaped classical beauty, the other that chiseled predatory sharpness. Edric. The name surfaced in Lucy's mind like a long-forgotten prayer, rising from some deep, instinctual place beyond memory. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped, the words scraping from his throat as if unused to human speech. Moonlight caught the unnatural gold of his irises, not the flat color of human eyes, but liquid, reflective, the pupils slit like a cat's. His gaze dropped to her throat, lingering on the frantic pulse visible beneath her skin. His jaw tightened, a muscle feathering in his cheek as he visibly restrained himself, the tendons in his neck standing out in sharp relief. Lucy should have fled, should have screamed, should have done any number of sensible things. Instead, she reached out with a hand that didn't tremble, pressing her palm flat against the burning heat of his chest. His heartbeat thundered against her fingers, too fast, too alive for something that felt impossibly ancient. The raised scar beneath her thumb mirrored the exact looping pattern of her pendant, as if the silver had branded him. "Tell me," she demanded, her voice low and steady, why I dream about you." The moment her skin made full contact, the night exploded in a barrage of phantom images. A blood-stained throne room, the weight of a silver crown on her brow, the coppery taste of blood on her tongue. Whose blood? The sensation of falling from a great height. Somewhere in the trees behind them, a branch snapped with deliberate force. Edric's head whipped up, his body tensing like a drawn bowstring. A howl pierced the silence, too close, too hungry, followed by answering calls from multiple directions. The hunt was coming, and they, the witch and the wolf, were the prey. The hidden chamber exhaled centuries of secrets with every breath of stale, incense-thick air. The walls pulsed with ancient energy, their surface carved with runes that slithered at the edges of vision. When Lucy looked directly at them, they stood still, but in her periphery they twisted like living things. The fire in the iron brazier burned with an unnatural blue core, its flames licking upward in slow, sinuous motions as if dancing to some forgotten dirge. The light cast writhing shadows that crawled across the vaulted ceiling, their shapes shifting between human figures and bestial forms in endless, agonized transformation. Lucy's breath fogged before her, each exhalation hanging suspended in the frigid air for several heartbeats before dissipating. Too long, far too long for natural breath. The cold bit deep, seeping through her clothes to gnaw at her bones, yet the pendant at her throat burned like a brand, its heat pulsing in time with the erratic flickering of the flames. Edric knelt before her on the rough stone floor, his powerful frame racked with tremors that spoke of unimaginable restraint. The firelight painted his bare torso in flickering gold, illuminating a tapestry of scars that told stories of countless battles. Some were thin and white with age, others still pink and raised, recent wounds that should have taken months to heal. But one mark in particular caught the light, an intricate looping pattern just above his heart that perfectly mirrored the design on Lucy's pendant. The scar seemed to glow faintly as she stared at it, pulsing in time with the burning metal against her own skin. "You were a Dora," he confessed, the words torn from him like flesh from bone. His voice resonated with the weight of centuries, each syllable rough with disuse and raw with grief. His hands hovered near her wrists, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from them, unnaturally warm, like stones left in the sun, yet never making contact. His fingers twitched with the memory of claws, the nails still bearing faint traces of black at their quick, the cuticles ragged as if recently reshaped from something more bestial. "My queen, my mate, my damnation." The moment the words left his lips, Lucy's vision fractured like broken glass. Images assaulted her senses with violent clarity. The cold, oppressive weight of a silver crown settling on her brow, its edges biting into her skin, the coppery tang of blood mixing with the cloying perfume of wild roses in some long-forgotten throne room, the sensation of falling endlessly through darkness, while a voice, his voice, screamed her name in anguish that echoed across centuries. Her fingers convulsed around his wrist, nails breaking skin as her body tried desperately to anchor itself against the flood of memories that weren't hers and yet were, the line between past and present blurring till she could no longer tell where Lucy ended and Adora began. "Show me," she demanded, her voice no longer entirely her own. There was a regality to it now, a steel-edged command that hadn't been there before, the voice of a queen accustomed to obedience, The words reverberated through the chamber, making the flames dance higher and the shadows shrink back. Edric's eyes darkened, the golden irises drowning in expanding black pupils that swallowed the light. His canines elongated with an audible wet click, a sound that made Lucy's stomach clench with primal recognition, her body responding in ways she didn't understand. The predator within him surfaced, his breath coming in ragged, uneven gusts that fogged the air between them. When he leaned in, the heat radiating from his body was nearly unbearable, like standing too close to a forge. His tongue, unnaturally hot and textured like the finest sandpaper, dragged a searing path along the column of her throat. The sensation sent electric jolts down her spine, her pulse hammering against the intrusion. He tasted her skin with deliberate slowness, savoring the salt of her sweat, the iron tang of her pulse, the intoxicating mixture of fear and longing that poured from her pores. His breath hitched as he reached the juncture of her neck and shoulder, his nose pressing into the spot as if committing her scent to memory. Then, with a violence that shook the chamber, he tore himself away. His snarl sent the fire into a frenzy, the flames licking upward as if trying to escape the brazier. His claws, fully extended now, black and gleaming, scored deep furrows in the ancient stone floor as he fought for control. The muscles in his arms and back stood out in sharp relief, tendons straining against skin as his entire body convulsed with the effort of restraint. "I'd rather die," he gasped, veins standing out like dark rivers beneath his pallid skin, his voice barely human, "than hurt you again." The words were punctuated by the wet crack of bones shifting unnaturally beneath his flesh, as if his very form rebelled against his will. Somewhere deep in the castle's bowels, a clock chimed 13 times, each toll vibrating through the stones beneath them with physical force. The fire guttered violently as an unnatural wind swept through the room, impossible as no windows or doors stood open to allow it. The gust carried with it the echo of mocking laughter, the sound layered with countless voices, and the unmistakable scent of charred flesh. Memories of a pyre long since burned to ash, yet whose smoke still clung to the castle's stones. Lucy's pendant turned to ice against her skin, so cold it burned, the metal searing her flesh with what might have been a warning or perhaps a reminder of debts unpaid. The pain was sharp and sudden, radiating outward in waves that made her vision swim. Beyond the chamber's walls, the howling began again. Closer now, hungrier. The sounds came from all directions, surrounding them, the voices of the pack rising in eerie harmony. And beneath it all, barely audible beneath the cacophony, the steady drip, drip, drip of something liquid hitting stone in the darkness just beyond the firelight's reach, a rhythmic counterpoint to the chaos that filled the chamber. The scent of fresh blood joined the other odors in the air, metallic and sweet, though its source remained hidden in shadow. The dawn came reluctantly to Blackest Castle, its pale fingers creeping across the grounds with hesitant, almost fearful movements. The light that filtered through the lingering mist was sickly, a wan, grayish-purple glow that seemed to leach color from the world rather than illuminate it. Lucy moved through the frozen grass, each step sending brittle crackles through the unnatural frost that coated every blade. The cold bit through her thin jacket, needling her skin with thousands of invisible pins, yet she barely noticed. It was the smell that struck her first. The coppery tang of blood hung thick in the air, so potent it coated her tongue and the back of her throat, metallic and cloying. But beneath it, worse than it, was something else. A faint undercurrent of decay, like meat left too long in the sun, mingled with the cloying sweetness of spoiled wine. The combination made her stomach lurch, bile rising hot and bitter in her throat. Then she saw him. Mr. Dragomir lay sprawled near the tool shed, his body twisted at an unnatural angle, one arm outstretched toward the castle gates. His fingers were clawed into the dirt, frozen in rigor mortis, as if he had been dragging himself forward when death finally took him. His head was wrenched back, glassy eyes staring blankly at the lightening sky, his mouth slack in a final silent scream. But it was his throat that held Lucy's gaze. The wound was ragged, torn rather than cut, the edges blackened as if burned. Blood had poured from it in thick rivulets, soaking into the earth beneath him, turning the soil into a dark, viscous mire. The edges of the pool had already begun to crust over, thin tendrils of frost creeping across its surface, forming delicate, lace-like patterns despite the morning's creeping warmth. Something, some instinct she couldn't name, compelled Lucy to kneel beside the body. The caretaker's right hand was locked in a death grip around the hilt of a silver dagger, his fingers stiff and unyielding. The blade was pristine, untouched by tarnish or time, its surface gleaming despite the blood that streaked its length. And there, etched into the metal, was a symbol, an intricate looping design that matched the one on her pendant exactly. Her breath caught. As she reached for the dagger, the morning breeze shifted, carrying with it the faintest whisper of sound, the rattle of chains, distant but unmistakable, echoing up from the castle's deepest dungeons. And beneath that, something else, the soft, deliberate click of a crossbow being cocked. Edric's always been messy. The voice was smooth, almost conversational, but it sent ice slithering down Lucy's spine. She turned slowly to see Grant Blackest emerging from the mist like a specter, his polished boots stepping neatly around the bloodstains with the ease of a man well acquainted with carnage. His smile was a razor's edge, all gleaming teeth and false charm, never touching the cold, calculating blue of his eyes as they flicked over the scene before settling on her. Lucy's fingers closed around the dagger's hilt. The moment her skin touched the metal, it burned, not with heat, but with something deeper, something alive. The engraved symbol pulsed faintly, glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light. "This isn't Edric's work," she said, her voice low and steady, despite the tremor in her hands. For the briefest instant Grant's smirk faltered. His pupils contracted to pinpricks, his body tensing as if struck. Then, just as quickly, his expression hardened, his gaze flicking to something over her shoulder. The air around them grew suddenly, unnaturally still, thick with the promise of violence. Somewhere in the mist, something moved, and the hunt began. The blood moon hung heavy in the sky, a swollen orb of crimson light that painted the ancient castle stones in shades of fresh slaughter. The air itself seemed to vibrate with pent-up energy, thick with the scent of ozone and wolf musk, of damp earth and something darker, something metallic and primal that set Lucy's teeth on edge. From the surrounding woods came the first snarl, low and guttural, vibrating through the ground beneath her feet. Then another and another. Shadows detached themselves from the trees, slinking forward with predatory grace. Dozens of wolves with eyes like smoldering coals, their massive forms silhouetted against the eerie red glow of the moon. Their lips curled back from dagger-length fangs, saliva dripping in thick strands to sizzle against the frosted grass. At their center stood Grant, his polished boots crunching through the brittle undergrowth as he stepped forward. The silver-tipped crossbow in his hands was leveled unerringly at Edric's heart, the metal gleaming wickedly in the unnatural light. Sophia's scream tore through the night, raw and ragged with terror. "He's a monster!" She clawed at Lucy's arm, her nails drawing thin lines of blood that welled up like rubies against pale skin. "For God's sake, Lucy, look at what he is!" Edric's transformation was a nightmare given flesh. His spine arched violently, bones cracking and elongating with sickening pops that echoed across the courtyard. Ebony fur erupted across his skin in undulating waves, spreading like spilled ink as his body twisted and reshaped itself. Claws tore through his fingertips, black and gleaming like shards of obsidian, scoring deep grooves into the stone beneath him. But worse, far worse, were the glimpses of something darker, moving beneath the surface of his wolf form. Shadows pooled around him like living things, twisting and coiling with malicious intent, as if something far more ancient and terrible lurked just beneath his skin. When he snarled, Lucy caught the glint of elongated canines, fangs meant for tearing through more than just flesh. She stepped forward anyway. The world narrowed to the space between her body and Grant's crossbow. The wolves circled closer, their growls rising to a fever pitch, but Lucy barely heard them. Her gaze locked onto Edric's crimson eyes, the wild, desperate love she saw there cutting through the monstrous exterior. "No," she said, her voice cutting through the growls like a blade. She turned to face the nightmare behind her, meeting those burning eyes without flinching. "He's mine." Edric moved faster than thought. One moment he was yards away, a monstrous shadow wreathed in darkness. The next, his hands, half-clawed, half-human, cradled her face with terrifying gentleness. His breath came in ragged pants, his entire body trembling with the Herculean effort of control. His lips brushed her throat, a whisper of a touch before his fangs finally pierced her skin. It wasn't the pain Lucy remembered from her dreams. White-hot ecstasy seared through her veins like liquid fire, burning away every thought, every fear, until there was nothing but the two of them, bound together by blood and magic and something far older. The pendant between them shattered with a sound like breaking glass, the shards dissolving into motes of silver light. A shock wave of power radiated outward, throwing Grant to his knees. The wolves whimpered and scattered like leaves in a gale as centuries of cursed magic unraveled in the space between heartbeats. Somewhere in the ruins, a figure slumped against the stones. Adrian, his face streaked with tears, watching as the spell he'd wrought finally broke beneath the weight of a love stronger than death. Lucy's knees buckled, but Edric caught her, his now fully human hands warm and steady against her skin. The mark on her throat pulsed once, twice, before fading to a silvery scar that gleamed in the strange half-light. Outside, the blood moon cracked cleanly in half, its malignant glow extinguished as the first true dawn in centuries broke over Blackest Castle, painting the world in gold and rose and the pure, untainted blue of a newborn sky. Epilogue forever. The cliff's edge dropped away into nothingness, the crashing waves far below swallowing the last remnants of the blood moon's crimson glow. Salt-kissed wind whipped through Lucy's hair as Edric's arms encircled her from behind, his body a living furnace against the pre-dawn chill. His lips traced the silvery scar on her throat, the mark of their binding, with a reverence that bordered on worship. Her fingers laced through his, their joined hands resting against her stomach as they watched the horizon bleed from black to indigo, to the first tentative gold of morning. The scent of the sea mingled with the crisp bite of pine from the distant forest, the world around them hushed and waiting. "Was I worth the wait?" Lucy murmured, tilting her head to catch his mouth with hers. The sound that ripped from Edric's chest wasn't human. A growl that vibrated through her bones, primal and possessive and utterly devoid of restraint. His kiss tasted of iron and storm winds and something ancient beyond naming, sealing promises older than the castle stones beneath their feet. When they broke apart, the first true sunrise in centuries gilded his features, revealing the wildness that would never fade, the gold still lurking in the depths of his pupils, the dangerous sharpness of his canines when he smiled that slow, wicked smile. Behind them their joined shadows stretched unnaturally long across the cliffside, twisting and merging as the light shifted. For one breathless moment, the silhouette resolved into something else entirely. No longer two figures, but a single monstrous wolf, with eyes like burning coals, its muzzle lifted in a silent howl that resonated in the marrow of Lucy's bones. The wind carried the echo of answering cries from the depths of the forest, while far below, the waves whispered secrets only lovers and monsters could understand, of blood and magic and the terrible price of forever. Somewhere in the ruins, a silver pendant melted into the earth, its purpose fulfilled at last. Somewhere in the dark, a sorcerer's ghost finally slept, his long vigil over, and on the cliff's edge, the Alpha King and his queen turned their faces toward the dawn, not human, not wolf, but something infinitely older and more terrible. Together, fade to black.